The Enclave, while being one of the most prominent and popular factions in the Fallout series, has never actually won. They've certainly come close every time, but they haven't won. The nature of their immense potential to change the wasteland has definitely made many wonder what would happen if they did indeed win. Fallout 3 and 76 are stories for another time, so let's go back to where it all began, an oil rig off the Californian coast. What if the Enclave won in Fallout 2? This scenario has the potential to cause one of the greatest changes in the Fallout timeline. Whether it's a good or bad change, I'll leave that up to you, but it certainly is one of the biggest. To give a short recap of Fallout 2, you were the Chosen One, a descendant of the Vault Dweller from Fallout 1. Your village is dying and you were sent out to retrieve a GECK, a pre-war Vault tech device that can save your village. Along your journey you travelled through numerous settlements and cities, and most notable ones being New California Republic, San Francisco and Vault City. The Brotherhood is still present but now operates in the shadows. Eventually through your travels you find out there's a GECK in Vault 13. After helping the Deathclaws in the Vault they reward you with the GECK. Along your journey you have encountered a mysterious group with advanced technology known only as the Enclave. Upon your return to your village you find everyone has been kidnapped by this mysterious Enclave. The next step is to infiltrate the Enclave's vertibird base and steal the tanker fob to drive an old oil tanker to the Enclave's main base, an oil rig out in the ocean. The Enclave's plan turns out to be releasing a toxin into the air that will kill all humanoids on the planet. The only ones who will survive are those who have been inoculated, so just the Enclave personnel. After rescuing the people of your village and the original Vault 13 residents, you sabotage the rig's reactor, and after defeating the monster that is Frank Horrigan, you sail off with your tribe and the Vault 13 residents on the oil tanker as the rig blows up in the distance. Now the recap is over, where would this universe differ? Unlike last time, it doesn't really matter what happens to the player, or rather the Chosen One. They could be discovered at Navarro and gunned down by the soldiers there, they could get lost wandering the desert, or they could just end up being too late to stop the Enclave poisoning the world. However the Chosen One meets their demise, the Enclave is left unopposed in its mission. The Enclave soon after releases the FEV Curling 13 into the air. It spreads throughout the entire globe. With the Enclave's estimates, it will have a 95% extermination rate of all humanoids on the planet. The only ways to survive this are if you are inoculated, which only the Enclave are, or if you're protected from the air somehow, like if you're in power armor or a vault. The Enclave also predicted that everyone exposed would be wiped out and the FEV would die on its own within a month after release. So the Enclave, satisfied with its work, sits silently on the rig waiting for the month to be up. On the mainland after release, almost everyone on the west coast dies within 2 days, with the rest of the country following soon after. The Brotherhood just manages to survive, as they are primarily in bunkers and make frequent use of power armor. Some Brotherhood bunkers quickly notice the death of settlers around them and hastily seal themselves off from the world as they once had before. Some bunkers fail to notice in time. In these cases, only the people in sealed rooms and in power armor survive. Because of these events, the Brotherhood is alerted to the toxin, and to ensure air purity in their bunkers, they filter their air through. They of course don't know how long the toxin will stay in the air for, so studies of the toxin are undertaken, but until further information is determined or the food supplies run out, the Brotherhood is sealed in their bunkers. The same with any other bunkers that may have survived. The surface is now full and silent. With no trace of human life, the flora and fauna start to take over settlements, incentivized by the large supply of human meat lying around. After the month is up, President Richardson, in an effort to rekindle patriotism and morale and to secure his re-election, begins the Enclave's operation to return to their homeland, with Augustus Autumn's father being placed in charge of the Mainland Command, or MAINCOM. As a first step, Navarro is greatly expanded as it becomes the hub of travel between the rig and the mainland. The Enclave starts settling, firstly through the military securing areas, then by civilians settling in. Vault City is a prime location to set up, as it has extremely advanced infrastructure and land that's been purified by Vault City's GECK, and it's always had a strange connection to the Enclave. From the more advanced technology and art reminiscent of Control Station Enclave, to the Vault being given the all-clear signal to open only 2 years after the Great War. So, Vault City becomes the Enclave's forwardmost base. 4 months post-reset, the Enclave have gained a proper foothold in the area, having Vault City as a fully operational base and starting to move civilians in to create the first proper Enclave colony. This is also used greatly for propaganda and boosts Enclave's support to colonize the wastes. Meanwhile, other Enclave forces have recently set up in the former NCR to gain access to the massive Brahmin and other farming resources. Navarro has expanded as the hub of travel between the rig and the mainland. Now that the Enclave has secured their foothold on the mainland, they intend to strengthen it. Over the next 3 months, chain fences and turrets are set up around the NCR, with a new science lab established to ensure maximum efficiency and minimal radiation from farming. However, it is concluded that currently the technology only available from a Garden of Eden creation kit, or GEC, is needed to supply the current and any future mainland bases with enough clean food. The technology is held within ancient Enclave records, but it is complicated to produce, and until a more efficient method can be found, the Enclave Command is only willing to devote enough resources to produce 3 kits. Including the one taken from Vault 13, the mainland force is given 4 GECs to work with. Navarro uses 1 to lighten supply reliance on the rig, the NCR's expansive farmland requires the use of 2 GECs, and Vault City had previously used a GEC when the original dwellers of Vault 8 emerged, so the last GEC was kept for future use. By the 8th month post-reset, the Enclave's supply line has come under fire. An unknown group has started targeting vertibirds flying between bases. Only 1 has been shot down, but the crew and supplies on board were taken. An Enclave task force is immediately mobilized to track down and eliminate this threat. After another month, Enclave intelligence has learned that members of this group are hiding out in San Francisco. They've determined that the number of attackers and the locations of their attacks indicate multiple enemy bases. The attackers have been identified as the Brotherhood of Steel, a paramilitary group built on worshipping technology. Their proximity to the Valdez oil tanker is alarming to the Enclave, and they'd rather see the last remnant of China in San Francisco gone, so the Enclave gives the authorization to burn the city down. Any survivors are captured and taken for interrogation, but reveal little information before they are killed. The Brotherhood remains a present threat, but have learned to cover their tracks. 1 year since the release of the FEV has passed now. Vault City, the NCR, and Navarro are all thriving communities, but the propaganda worked a little too well. People quickly got comfortable to the mainland life. Now the expected birth rate for the year has skyrocketed since last year. It's unexpected, but predictions indicate this will be manageable and extremely beneficial to the colonization of the mainland if they can sustain a proper agricultural expansion. But for further expansion, more GECs will be required. Enclave Command repeatedly denies requests for more, so Maincom initiates the largest search operation in Enclave history. Using vertibirds for this task is deemed too costly, so 4 expeditionary forces are sent out across the wastes to search vaults for these pre-war artifacts. Alpha Team is sent east towards Nevada, Bravo Team is sent north to Oregon, Charlie Team is sent south to Lower California, and Delta Team is sent along with Alpha but given a special directive. Vault 13 and 15, being next to the NCR, are immediately searched, revealing 1 more GEC hidden within Vault 13, bringing the reserve up to 2 GECs. After the 13th month post-reset, the population of the mainland bases are still well within the limit, but Vault City has discovered their generators are being overworked to supply the city. It's discovered in the city records that the original inhabitants were fighting a group of ghouls at the Gecko power plant. Realizing that Gecko could power Vault City and provide additional power to the other installations around the area, a team of engineers is sent to secure and restart the plant. Meanwhile, the expeditionary teams are closing distance on their targets. Alpha is still en route to their primary target, but Delta's split off and radioed Maincom. Their mission is complete. They've found the missile silos buried beneath Hopeville and Ashton. An Enclave team is sent to Hopeville to bring the facilities under their control, and Delta is ordered to reunite with Alpha. 14 months post-reset, the missile silos are almost all operational, with the still incomplete team working overtime to get the facilities functional as soon as possible. Out in the wastes, the expedition teams are reaching their initial destinations. Charlie Team reaches the former city of Bakersfield. After walking through the dead city of Necropolis and descending into the depths of Vault 12, they come up empty-handed, and move on to their next target. A few days later they reach Los Angeles, or what's left of it. Charlie Team arrives at the coordinates of the LA Vault, but all that's in sight is a crater. It's so deep it's almost like someone detonated a nuke underground. Whatever the case, Charlie Team's mission is a failure, and they return home. After traveling through the Mojave Desert with Alpha, Delta Team finds their secondary target, the alternative to the GEC problem, Vault 22. Seeing the growths and the warnings outside, Delta radios Maincom for orders. Alpha is ordered to continue on to their next target, while Delta is ordered to assess the condition of the vault and the research. Delta descends into the vault, but the horrors inside force them to abandon the mission and retreat to a nearby Enclave refueling station to report back to Maincom. If they want the research in the vault, they're going to have to fight for it. Alpha Team continues on by themselves and stumbles upon an incredible discovery. Vegas. It's still standing. What should be a smoldering crater is a standing city. Entering the city, they are welcomed by the robot sentries and directed to the tallest building, the Lucky 38. On the top floor they are greeted by none other than Robert House, the owner of Robco. What appears to be a simulated intelligence to the soldiers assures them that it is a real person. Confusion is the immediate response. Mr. House explains that he is sealed within a life preservation chamber, allowing him to live for so long and protecting him from the airborne toxin that exterminated the rest of Vegas. House offers the soldiers a proposition to their organization. They are welcome to freely move through and inhabit Vegas, but it shall remain autonomous with Mr. House in charge. And his second proposition, if they can find his platinum chip, he will share his technological expertise with them. The soldiers relay this to Autumn directly, and they are ordered not to tell anyone of House's existence and to regroup with Delta at the refueling station. With the current situation in the Mojave, Maincom has to plan what to do next. Autumn Sr. suggests expanding the refueling station and moving a section of their forces to the station to act as a beachhead into the Mojave to resolve both problems. But the preparations would take some time to organise, and unfortunately another problem presents itself. Charlie Team reports in. They've made their way into Oregon, reaching Portland, but the horrors found on that frontier, well, the less said the better. Of the 8 soldiers on the expeditionary team, there were only 2 survivors. Of the other 6, anyone who didn't get devoured by that god-forsaken city blew their brains out rather than living with what they saw. The infestation level was too high. The city had to be burned to the ground. Maincom had to deal with this revelation with extreme prejudice. The only conclusion was to use a nuke from Hopeville. It was the only way to deal with the abomination that was Portland. Hopeville was given the green light, and just like that, the city, the nightmare, was gone. But it didn't go without notice. Enclave Command was furious that a launch was ordered without their authorization. Enclave Command sent a detachment of loyal soldiers to replace the one stationed there by Maincom. Although Autumn Sr. protested that as commander of the mainland operation, he has supreme authority over mainland matters, Richardson plays it off as him trying to usurp power by controlling the nukes himself, and Richardson also justifies the takeover of the silos as a deterrent from the mainland attacking the rig, thus putting the mainland under closer scrutiny and driving citizens of the rig against the colonization effort. So now the mainland can't rely on any support from the rig. The following month, the plans to expand Vault City are finalized, and the Gek is loaded onto a vertibird to be transported from NCR to Vault City. Unfortunately, the vertibird never reaches its destination. The bird is found halfway between the cities. It's been shot out of the sky, with once again all the crew and supplies missing, including the Gek. Scouts are sent out all across the wastes to report any Brotherhood sightings. The Brotherhood at the moment remain a threat to the Enclave, but Autumn Sr. doesn't have the time to worry about them at the moment. Maincom has finally organised the resources to be transported to the Mojave so a base can be set up. Autumn Sr. himself goes along, as he personally wants to meet Mr. House, so the reinforcements set out. The refueling station is set up without incident, and the operations begin. 3 squads, supported by flamer units, are sent to clear Vault 22 of hostiles. Amazingly, none of the men die in the raid, but some are undoubtedly shaken. Once the threat is over, the data is retrieved and samples are collected and then returned to base. Meanwhile, Autumn Sr. travels to the Lucky 38 to negotiate with Mr. House. Autumn Sr. accepts Mr. House's terms, but he also warns Mr. House that he mustn't reveal himself to anyone else just yet. Mr. House may be pure human, but he's not Enclave personnel and therefore at risk of him not being accepted. Autumn Sr. tells Mr. House that the Enclave will eventually reach Vegas, but due to the decreased interest in the colonization effort and the subsequent lack of colonizers from the rig, it could be as much as 10 years before they have sufficient enough people to begin colonization. Over the next 3 months, business carries on as usual. The expansion of the 3 major bases in California continue, but without Gex, it is a slow expansion. In the Mojave, the scientists working on the research found in Vault 22 make a breakthrough. They're on the verge of discovering the secret to unlimited plant growth. The expedition teams are also at work in the Mojave. Most vaults are empty. Vault 34 at least provides some weaponry, including an experimental EMP gun. However, Vault 3 and 21 are discovered to still be fully populated. The revelation that the government has returned after all these years is met with doubt and confusion. The Enclave doesn't have an interest in utilising these vaults just yet, so they leave them for now, only taking Vault 3's spare Gek. By the 19th month post-reset, Enclave scouts have tracked Brotherhood movements to a 1k radius, after careful searching their base is located. It's an old army storage facility, equipped with numerous defences including auto turrets and chain fences. All of this is relayed to Maincom, and they find this quite alarming with how well fortified the Brotherhood is. They devise a plan using a mixture of the FEV toxin and pulse guns developed from the prototype from Vault 34. In the end, it is an Enclave victory, although not at a low cost. Many men were lost in the battle, but it is still beneficial to the Enclave as they have a new base to use. While the lack of any Gek or proof of one's use, and the lack of any younger Brotherhood soldiers gives Autumn Sr. the impression that this wasn't the Brotherhood's headquarters, Richardson forces him to give up all searches for the Brotherhood, as Richardson publicly announces the defeat of the Brotherhood, now leaving the Enclave unopposed and subsequently mending public opinion of the mainland effort somewhat. The next 6 months after this finally give Maincom the impression that they're in control. The Vault 22 research is finally completed, and the Enclave can utilise the accelerated plant growth to terraform the landscape without the need for Geks. The Enclave releases the modified plant seeds from high altitude by vertibird, allowing the seeds to spread all around the area. Within years, the region will be dotted with greenery. Within decades, the west coast will be covered with lush green forests. That, of course, is a bit too long, so the seeds are also directly planted at all of the mainland colonies, including Vegas. Everything is business as usual. The expansion of the colonies is now on track, and there's no sign of trouble from Vegas as of yet. Barely an eyebrow is raised when Richardson is re-elected for his final term as president in a landslide victory, accompanied by his new vice president Harry Richardson, his spiteful, conniving son. But peace doesn't last forever. 4 years later, in 2248, a total of 6 years after the planet was wiped, another problem presents itself. Thanks to the Brotherhood defeat, the colonization effort returned to around normal pace. Maincom has now enough people to warrant the colonization of Vegas, and enough supplies to carry it out. Construction crews are sent first to Vegas to repair the damage and prepare it for colonization. Vegas being such a large city, Autumn Sr. thinks he can contract the help of the Vault dwellers of Vault 3 and 21. While Mr. House has to step in to persuade Vault 21, both Vault populations eventually get to work rebuilding Vegas. Seeing this project progress slowly, Richardson orders that the non-Enclave personnel should be used as slave labor. Autumn Sr. protests the idea, but in the end he loyally obeys the president. There's a few riots that are started by this news, but Richardson orders the use of lethal force to those uncooperative. The Vault dwellers soon adapt to their meagre existence, and although painful, they at least take some solace in their outstanding job rebuilding Vegas, as they finish it in only a year. Eager to boost morale and see how the project has progressed, President Richardson requests that Autumn Sr. organises a grand opening for the public that Richardson himself will attend. Once Richardson arrives and inspects the place, he's astounded by the beauty of it. He reconsiders his stance on the Vault dwellers. After all, they are pure human and they've put in the work, they deserve to be rewarded. But Richardson does wonder where the robots came from. Autumn explains that they're security robots that the Vault dwellers repaired. They even managed to reconstruct some of the factories that could be used to produce weapons, armor, and vertibirds. Sure of his decision now, Richardson tells Autumn Sr. that he intends to make the dwellers Enclave citizens. His son Harry overhears this conversation. He's not the tolerant type, and has an intense hatred for everyone not from the oil rig, especially if they're not even Enclave. He's always been a scheming little prick, and he's a bit unhinged, and he has always resented his father. So Harry sneaks into the armory and takes some explosives. He plants them under the stage that his father and Autumn will stand on during the ceremony. As Richardson speaks about the great accomplishments of the Enclave and the bright future ahead of them, Harry primes the detonator. Then as Richardson starts to go on about how they couldn't have done it without the Vault dwellers, that in fact they're a valuable part of the Enclave, and to celebrate their hard work, they shall be BOOM! The stage has collapsed. The President and the man in charge of Maincom, along with 2 Secret Service agents, were directly in the blast. Mere seconds before the President was going to give citizenship to the Vault dwellers, he was killed in the explosion along with the other 3. The crowd scatters as the Vice President is evacuated onto Vertibird and flown back to the rig. As per the presidential line of succession, the Vice President assumes the role of President. Now, Harry Richardson is the new President Richardson. The President immediately casts blame on the Vault Dwellers for the death of his father, using them as a scapegoat to avoid his own persecution. He orders the young Major Augustus Autumn to take a squad to Vegas and execute all of the Vault Dwellers. Although Autumn would surely follow orders, the Enclave's monster, Frank Horrigan, is brought with the team for motivation. Once they arrive at Vegas, the Vault Dwellers are grouped together in the street. Autumn gives the order and the soldiers open fire on them all. The act is sickening to the soldiers. Even Autumn doesn't get the satisfaction from revenge that he hoped he would. But the sight of Frank Horrigan ripping the Dwellers in half keeps their fingers tight on the triggers until every last Vault Dweller is dead. Now there's no one left to prove that Richardson was guilty. Well, almost no one. Mr. House, still secure in the Lucky 38 with Richardson blissfully unaware of his existence, had recorded Richardson planting the bomb that killed his father. Yet he had no one to trust now. There was simply nothing he could do at the moment. So once again, Mr. House goes silent, waiting for his opportunity. After the situation has calmed down, Richardson begins his plans. Autumn gets promoted to Lieutenant Colonel and placed in charge of Maincom by Richardson. Lieutenant Colonel Autumn intends to continue his father's legacy by continuing the colonization of the mainland. Richardson isn't pleased by this revelation, but he decides it makes little difference. It may even be better for him. So for now, the Enclave continues to move east, carefully avoiding highly irradiated areas like Lower California. Over the next year, the Enclave develops a new fleet of vertibirds, along with power armor and weapons to supply the soldiers, all thanks to Vegas's industrial potential, but this creates a divide among the colonies as they feel too many resources being funneled into Vegas. President Richardson promises to ratify these concerns in his next term by giving more support to all mainland settlements. As the mainland population old enough to vote outnumbers the oil rig by more than double, President Richardson wins the 2250 election thanks to his promise to help the mainland, and his swift action when the Vault Dwellers assassinated the previous president. Richardson begins the next phase of his plan with the creation of a new secret agency that would be exclusively loyal to him, and names this agency Trident. The only problem now was the waiting. It was better to play along with Autumn for now. Over the next 4 years, the Enclave expands further and further east. Trident comes along with it, slowly expanding and slithering into every sector of the Enclave. The Enclave eventually discovers the remains of an old space center in Arizona and reports it back to Maincom. Richardson pretends not to be very interested with this news, but in reality this is what he was waiting for. Bloomfield Space Center, the Enclave's future. Richardson orders that it be left alone by Autumn while he colonizes Phoenix, but secretly sends his own men to assess the installation and make it operational again. Now that he has his escape plan, Richardson begins phase 2 of his plan. He orders his operatives to gear up with old T-51 power armor and laser weapons and to attack the mainland settlements. The mainland is obviously unprepared for these attacks from unknown assailants that merely shoot a few guards and burn a building or two, then run off having taken nothing. The President is quick to blame the Brotherhood of Steel, even though they were supposedly defeated years ago. Nevertheless, Autumn begins sending out scouts to search for the attackers, but all of the searches come up with nothing. The President claims they must be hiding out in the lower parts of California that the Enclave avoided venturing into. So Autumn sends out scouts to the region in search of the Brotherhood. To everyone's surprise, the scouts report there is a Brotherhood presence in the region. Obviously Richardson didn't expect for Autumn to find the Brotherhood, as it was only a hoax put on by Richardson. No matter, this may actually be more beneficial. The Brotherhood base is larger than the Sierra Army Depot. From what the scouts can see, it consists of a large farm area, most likely constructed with the stolen Gek. Multiple barracks, a command center, one unknown building that is most likely an armory, and a massive garage. Mostly filled with off-road vehicles, old military issue, machine guns on the back, but also 2 APCs and 1 tank. The defences consist of portable anti-aircraft turrets and a thick perimeter wall lined with guard posts and anti-personnel turrets. Wanting to preserve this as long as possible, Richardson orders that an attack be held off until the Enclave prepares, by expanding Vegas's production capacity. At the same time, he orders some of his personal men on a special mission. They fly to the Brotherhood base and warn them of the impending attack, under the pretense of being deserters. The Brotherhood is suspicious of the supposed deserters, but as they provide ample intelligence about the Enclave and even their vertibird, the Brotherhood takes into consideration the possibility of attacking Vegas. If what the deserters say about Vegas being a lightly guarded city with manufacturing capabilities, then it could be a viable target to deal a major blow to the Enclave while greatly aiding the Brotherhood. The attack plan is drafted and the Brotherhood sends out an attack force from multiple Brotherhood bases, all driving to Vegas. Meanwhile, the newly promoted Colonel Autumn heads to Vegas to oversee the production of the new off-road assault vehicles. Upon his arrival, Mr. House takes notice of the Colonel, not only a high-ranking Enclave member, but the son of the one person who dealt with House. This was an opportunity, using the Securitrons to direct him to the Lucky 38 for a talk with his father. Autumn is obviously confused. He cautiously enters the Lucky 38 and rides the lift to the top. It takes a bit of explaining before Autumn understands who Mr. House is, but he still doesn't believe what this computer screen is saying. How could the president have assassinated not only Autumn's father, but the president's own father? Of course, Mr. House has a recording that even Autumn can't deny as evidence. Before he has time to watch it, an explosion goes off in the background. The Brotherhood is attacking the gates. Autumn tells House he'll be back, but House replies that his business with him is concluded and he gives him the recording. However, he does assure Autumn that his Securitrons will defend Vegas. As Autumn rushes to the battle, with the Securitrons behind him, he can see some vertibird gunships laying fire into the Brotherhood trucks as they drive off into the distance. Seems like the Brotherhood didn't expect the Enclave to have gunships. But back to the more pressing matter. Could what House was saying be true? Autumn needed answers. He went to his quarters and played the recording. His worst fears are confirmed. Harry Richardson, the President of the United States, had murdered Autumn's father and the previous president. Autumn immediately calls a meeting with all the officers at Vegas. All of them were as shocked as he was. No one has any idea what to do. Richardson had just claimed that they were in a state of emergency and therefore had given himself emergency power. Then someone suggests starting a rebellion. That would be treason, many say. But Autumn declares the president has already committed treason. There's no legal way out of this. Autumn admits that this might be their only option. He's met with doubt, but he orders that everyone in Vegas and at Hoover Dam be debriefed on the situation while he contacts the rest of Maincom. Autumn speaks with Maincom. They express concern with the situation and are willing to help Autumn, but only if he can provide the evidence, so he organizes for them to come meet with him at Vegas. As this is going on, the Brotherhood is setting up the new bunker they found in Hidden Valley. It will serve as a good foothold in the area as they prepare for a second attack while working on a way to get around the vertibirds. Back in Vegas, Autumn anxiously waits for the other leaders of Maincom. His radio comes on, announcing that they're approaching and preparing to land, but then, boom, the vertibird explodes and falls to the ground. Multiple vertibirds appear on the horizon. It appears the president's found out about this rebellion. Autumn signals that they're under attack, but he's too late. The enemy vertibirds fly over the city, bombing the barracks. Once Autumn's vertibirds are in the air, they begin dogfighting with the enemy vertibirds, giving Autumn's men enough time to set up anti-aircraft weaponry. The soldiers eventually even the battle with their rockets and miniguns. In the end, it's a victory for Autumn's men, but a costly one. Over half of their vertibirds were destroyed and a quarter of their men were killed. Autumn calls a meeting once again. He orders that the production be hastened on the gunships while halted on the road vehicles. As he's talking, men in T-51 power armor walk in behind him with guns raised. It's the Brotherhood. They managed to sneak in while they were fighting. They request the surrender of Autumn and his men, but Autumn proposes an alliance, and explains their situation as rebels. It was the only thing he could really do at that moment, and from the look of it, neither he nor the Brotherhood could defeat the president on their own. The Brotherhood members accept the proposal on the condition that they be granted access to all the advanced technology Autumn has, and move into the city along with Autumn's rebels. So it's decided, Autumn and the Brotherhood align themselves in the interest of taking down the president. They prepare for the inevitable second attack from the Enclave. They may attempt to disable Hoover Dam, so a division is sent there to defend it.
Autumn decides to ask House for more help, but all he can offer is the few Securitrons still in Vegas. Until Autumn finds his platinum chip, he's going into sleep mode. It only takes a few days for the Enclave to return with almost all of their vertibirds. It seems the President really doesn't like that Autumn rebelled against him. Although the rebels had developed more vertibirds to use since the last encounter, and they were certainly prepared this time, with gun emplacements everywhere and a much larger force comprised of Brotherhood soldiers donning the advanced power armor, standing shoulder to shoulder with men they were just a week ago sworn enemies with, the rebels just couldn't defend against such a large attack force, especially when Frank Horrigan was leading the carnage. They are soon overrun and Autumn gives the order for the rebels to retreat. The Securitrons cover the soldiers while they rush to the landing pads. Everyone loads up onto all the remaining vertibirds. The men ask Autumn where they are going. He responds saying there's a handful of old Enclave bunkers dotted around the east coast they can use as bases. And just like that, the rebels leave the west coast. Some of them go to warn the main Brotherhood bases, but they refuse to leave, opting to stay and fight the Enclave. But that's just what Richardson wants. The rebels altogether were too powerful to allow to exist, but the weakened Brotherhood is perfect. He orders that no one is to attack the Brotherhood, but exclaims that he has to continue to hold emergency powers in this state of war, and that production is to be at full capacity to fuel the war effort. In reality, he wants to produce parts to get the rockets at Bloomfield operational, and create even more rockets. After crossing the country in vertibirds, the rebels enter West Virginia and Autumn announces they're almost at the first location. Suddenly, a voice chimes in on the radio. "Unknown aircrafts, identify yourselves." The shocked Colonel Autumn decides to oblige. "Colonel Autumn, US Army." The radio goes silent for a minute, then comes back with coordinates to land at. Upon landing, the rebels are greeted with soldiers wearing unknown power armor with weapons aimed at them. One of them steps forward and directs Colonel Autumn to come with him. Autumn is led down into a bunker where he meets what looks like the man in charge. He introduces himself as General Slater, part of the Enclave, the remnant of the government. Autumn is confused. He asks if he's in contact with Control Station Enclave. Slater says that they haven't had contact since the war, and assumes that Autumn is then a part of the Enclave. Slater asks why Autumn is here, and Autumn gives the whole story of the virus released to the defeat at Vegas. Slater's surprised that it was the oil rig that released the virus. Given what Autumn has said, Slater indicates that the West Coast Enclave looks to be their common enemy. He radios his men to allow Autumn's soldiers into the bunker. Autumn asks if Slater would be willing to fight the President with him. Slater says he will support him, but he needs to know everything he can about the West Coast Enclave. Autumn asks for the same courtesy for the East Coast Enclave. After a lengthy discussion, they review the resources of each faction. Including Autumn's men, they have about 3/4 of the soldiers and equipment that the West Coast possesses. But they also have been developing new technology since the war. They managed to produce power armor and vertibirds superior to the ones used on the West Coast. The East Coast also has access to orbital weapons. The Bradley Hercules may not be in the right orbit to strike any targets, but there was one other satellite lying silent in orbit ready to be used by their strategic AI Modus, the Kovac Muldoon. It only had enough fuel for one last mission, but that should be all they need. The plans are drawn and the East Coast Enclave spends the next month gearing up and preparing for war. Back on the West Coast, the situation has developed into chaos. Richardson has prioritized the completion of the Bloomfield rockets over everything else, and the citizens are now essentially slaves. The Brotherhood is still around, only for the President to blame for the conditions that he's put his citizens in. The President finally reveals his plan to the citizens of the Rig. Once the rockets at Bloomfield are ready for launch, they will leave this planet as the Hopeville nukes target the mainland, wiping out the last of humanity on this dust ball. A small group of the people on the Rig decide this is too far and attempt to escape the Rig and warn the rebels. The President catches on and orders that the fleeing vertibirds be shot down. 2 of them are, but one manages to escape, and eventually finds the East Coast Enclave on the radio, explaining the plan. Autumn and Slater agree that the time to strike is now, and the invasion of the West begins. The East Coast forces are split into 3 divisions, Alpha, Omega, and Sigma. Alpha will target the Rig and take out the President. Omega will prevent the rockets from leaving Bloomfield. Sigma will be commanded by Autumn himself and will prevent the nukes from launching at all costs. On the 4th of November 2254, the East Coast Enclave begins the invasion of the West. The sight of dozens of vertibirds in the sky is first noticed by Vegas as they fly over them. Sigma is the first to land at Hopeville. Initially, Colonel Autumn offers the troops inside a chance to surrender, but it seems they are all Richardson's zealots. Sigma storms the base, coming under heavy fire from Trident operatives. Over at Bloomfield, Omega has landed, but auto turrets have pinned them down. They request support, and this is when Slater authorizes Modus to activate the Kovac Muldoon and adjust its orbit to meet Bloomfield. Within 10 minutes, the Kovac Muldoon is in position and striking targets on Omega's command, and they start progressing through the base. It's at this point that Alpha reaches the oil rig. Storming it, they notice a distinct lack of people anywhere. The turrets keep them distracted, but there's no humans. Simultaneously, Omega reports to Slater that they see what appears to be the President's vertibird along with a large escort. Slater, realizing what's happening, tries to contact Alpha immediately, but it's too late. The rig reactor blows, taking all of Alpha with it. The vertibird escort now aims their guns at Omega and pins them down once again. As the President arrives at Bloomfield and prepares to board the rocket, he radios his men at Hopeville to begin the launch sequences. Sigma is making their way through the installation when the launch sirens go off. They've only got 5 minutes left till launch, but Autumn's men manage to charge through the enemies with all they've got. 3 minutes left. The rockets at Bloomfield are loaded and emerge out of the ground and begin preparing to launch. 2 minutes left. Autumn's men are in the control room, but so is Frank Horrigan. The men lay into him with every weapon they got, but it barely scratches him. Autumn watches as he rips soldier after soldier in two. 1 minute left. Only Autumn and one private are left. Horrigan taunts them, saying they're all going to die. The private tells the colonel to shoot his fusion core, then he'll charge Horrigan. Autumn protests. Surely there's another way. The fusion cores won't even be enough to kill him. The private says they're out of time, there's no other way, and besides, the fusion cores in the East Coast power armor are 10 times more powerful than regular ones. Autumn accepts the private's final request, and shoots his core. The private then charges the monster. Horrigan picks him up off the ground and laughs as he prepares to rip him apart. Boom. The private wasn't lying, that explosion was pretty goddamn powerful. Horrigan was now a headless torso. Too bad that Autumn also had a massive piece of shrapnel sticking out of his stomach. He was bleeding out, but with all his strength left, he dragged himself to the controls, and with 10 seconds left, managed to press the abort button. The world was safe, for now, but Omega was still dealing with the last of Richardson's forces. They were closing in on the command center, but it was too late. The rockets had begun launching. They tried to order a strike on them, but the Kovac Muldoon's salvo had run dry. As the rockets lifted off, they tried to shoot them down. Vertibird air support managed to gun one of the 3 down, but the other 2 got through. It didn't seem like there was anything they could do. Then, at the last second, Slater orders Modus to move the Kovac Muldoon to the coordinates of the rockets. Using the last of its fuel, the Kovac Muldoon managed one last burn of the thrusters, boosting it towards the rockets' trajectories. Just as the rockets left the atmosphere and the President thought he escaped, the Kovac Muldoon completed its final mission by crashing into both rockets and exploding, lighting up the sky with fire and debris. And just like that, Richardson was defeated. His great plan for humanity had failed, and his enclave had crumbled. Soon after, the East Coast forces invaded the West Coast colonies. With the help of the citizens, it wasn't long before what was left of Trident fell, putting an end to the last remnant of Richardson's enclave that had held his people at gunpoint since Autumn's betrayal. Many lives were lost in the defeat of Richardson's enclave, including Colonel Autumn, who had bled out in the Hopeville bunker, still clutching the abort switch. For his actions, he was awarded the Medal of Honor and promoted to Brigadier General. The East Coast Enclave picked up the pieces in the West, re-establishing government after Richardson's desertion. Finally, after over a century, the two halves of this civilization were reunited,
and would eventually blossom into a new worldwide civilization. But for now, they decided to focus on uniting everyone in the remains of America. The Brotherhood, who had managed to survive through the war, was rewarded for the participation of many of its members in the war under Colonel Autumn. They were welcomed into this new union as equals. Mr. House eventually revealed himself once again. Wishing to remain autonomous, he was given control of Vegas in exchange for continued industrial support. As one last act of defiance to Richardson, the new Union voted unanimously to throw down the old banner of the Enclave, as they were now once again Americans.